What is up, people of Middle-earth? Welcome to my The Lord of the Rings of Power teaser trailer breakdown. I'm also going to get into what we know about the plot, some background information, because there's lots of details popping out now. If you didn't know already, and if you couldn't tell already, I'm quite a big Lord of the Rings fan. Now, I will also get into my impressions of this teaser trailer throughout this video, or maybe save it a little bit towards the end. There's quite a lot to discuss, despite only getting little snippets of various scenes and characters, such as a younger Elrond, the show heavily following a younger Galadriel, and just what kind of changes they even are making to the continuity of Lord of the Rings, because this is somewhat condensing it down a little bit in terms of the timeline, since there are multiple ages of Middle-earth, and, you know, it's even going to bring in Isildur and other characters, so there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, so let me know if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings, and what you're feeling, like what your reaction was to this trailer. Would really appreciate a like on this video, branching into new shows, new franchises out there on the channel. I want to cover a lot more things, so if you could leave your support, if you're a fan of Tolkien's work, I'd really appreciate that. And hey, maybe subscribe, because I will be covering this show as we get more on it, as well as reviews when the episodes drop. So as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, this is an expensive ass TV show coming to Prime Video. So we're in for some really impressive visuals, production. I think they've even said they've got around 5 seasons planned, around 250 million for the first season, leading up to over around about, should I say, $1 billion for the actual planned projected arc of the show, which is absolutely insane. So whatever you feel about the look of this first trailer, you know, at some level, as a fan of Tolkien's works and Middle-earth, shall I say, there should be something in it for everyone, but that's the optimistic side of me coming out. It already has, beyond this, the second season greenlit, and they just plan for dozens and dozens of hours of content. But we know, especially given the title, I wonder what this could be about, the Rings of Power, first and foremost, that is. So the show is set during the forging of the Rings of Power, which is when Sauron was rising in Middle-earth. And I trust quite a lot of you know about this already, but just to get into a little bit of the details for those who may be a little bit rusty on it, he got those rings forged and more or less deceived the different races of Middle-earth to bend them to his will, with eventually, as the saying goes, the one ring to rule them all. So personally for me, even just at the very basic premise, as we get into the larger, darking, looming evil that is coming, I love the idea and the concept of seeing across the multiple seasons of the show, as a result of this, getting into the slow descent of the people of Middle-earth, specifically those who wield the Rings of Power, as they bend to Sauron's will as times go on. But we've also got some exclusive information and photos from Vanity Fair, and there's something I want to get started off with what they say with regards to the showrunners, and they said that Patrick McKay and JD Payne are agonizingly aware of the pressure. Their series will juggle 22 stars and multiple storylines, from deep within the dwarf mines of the Misty Mountains to the high politics of the Elven Kingdom of Lindon, and the humans' powerful Atlantis-like island, Numenor. All of this will center eventually around the incident that gives the trilogy its name, the forging of the rings, says McKay. Rings for the elves, rings for the dwarves, rings for men, and then the one ring Sauron used to deceive them all. It's the story of the creation of all those powers, where they came from, and what they did to each of those races. So since we're going along that route, I'm pretty damn sure we're going to see Sauron disguised as Anatar, because that's who we went round as, so nobody would be like, hey, yeah, you're that guy. We know you. Now, Sauron at this time, disguised as Anatar, convinces Celebrimbor, who's actually played by Charles Edwards, and the Murdain Guild to forge these rings. And this is where Galadriel comes in, because, you know, originally in the story, she was, you know, this was against her advice. So she was kind of like, here, you know, something is cooking here, and really this is somewhat of the intuition that Galadriel has during this show. She can't quite place a finger on what is going on, but she has the sense that evil is indeed looming, and as we know, Anatar, aka Sauron, is very much so putting his plans into motion, hence the title of the series, The Rings of Power. As a result of Galadriel being quite, you know, in the loop of things going around about that time, the first season will consist of, I believe, 8 episodes following Galadriel, as she is getting more or less, you know, this is what I'm kind of looking forward to, especially from some of the footage as we see her riding out, some of the photos that we're going to to be talking about just getting very sus about what's going on. Now, to get kind of an essence of what is going on in this age of Middle-earth, Vanity Fair describes it as more or less the second one seemingly is a time of peace for Middle-earth after an era of horror and conflict. The wicked god Morgoth has been defeated and his apprentice Sauron has vanished. Vanished, eh, in Anatar? As the series begins, Galadriel is actually hunting down the last remnants of their collaborators who claimed the life of her brother. And the third age is where we get into, you know, the adventures of Frodo and Sam. And as we know, this show is set before that, quite a long time before that, in the second age. So you can see, you know, from the various shots in the trailer, exactly what Galadriel's somewhat mission is, albeit it's going to be quite the rabbit hole for her to go down. Now, I do believe personally this period of Middle-earth is rich, like really rich with content and story to explore. Even getting into something like personally for me that really amps me up. It's quite an obvious, easy one, but whenever we get introduced to Anatar, you know, aka Sauron, seeing the demeanor and the mannerisms, getting into his head, how he articulates himself, just things like that, I think that's something really kind of giddy for fans to get into, providing, you know, it's executed very, very well. Now, at the very beginning of the trailer, the opening shot, we get to see the kingdom of Numenor before it was drowned into the sea by the Valar, and if you kind of know about that, you know about that, but we could actually be getting into that with possible flashbacks towards the very beginning, almost akin, if you will, to the Fellowship of the Ring, where we actually got somewhat of a flashback sequence to where Sauron, you know, was defeated by Isildur. More on that in just a moment. Now, the girl we see at the beginning of the trailer is kind of a hobbit, you could say, but not quite a hobbit. She's somewhat, as they're describing, a proto-hobbit known as Harfoots, or a Harfoot, of which is an ancestor to the hobbits that we know and love from The Lord of the Rings. I really do like the voiceover line of her saying, and I know it is a bit kind of face value cheesy, but her using the words of, you know, ever wondered what's out there? I suppose this is a nice callback, I mean, well, technically within the premise of the show, foreshadowing into the very adventurous spirit of hobbits to come, namely the Bagginses. Even though there are some other hobbits who, you know, made a name for themselves, but you know what I mean. We get a few badass shots of Galadriel in the trailer. I think, like, she personally looks really, really kick-ass. From seeing her climb up these really icy edges of this mountain, to riding on horseback at the front of this army. We also have a really, really kick-ass shot from Vanity Fair of her in this armor, in where she's described as the commander of the northern armies. We also get a new shot of a character named Arondir. There's going to be quite a few new original characters added into the Tolkien lore here for the show, and here we can see him equipping his bow. He is a Sylvan elf, and with some of the Vanity Fair exclusive images, we get a little bit more context to his character, in where we see Bronwyn here with her forbidden love, as it's described, Arondir, in the village of Tiherad. This is what I mean, like, Lord of the Rings pronunciations are weird, so please, if you're a hardcore fan, do forgive me. I'm a fan, but not the kind of fan who knows technically how to pronounce every little kind of Tolkien name. I believe we even see the Elven King Gil-galad here, but he kind of... everyone needs to put a little bit of an F in the chat for him because of, you know, he's one of the people who went up against Sauron, and we all know what that mace did to a lot of people. Here we get a shot of a dwarf who is the Prince Durin of Khazad-dûm, and from the details we've learned, we are going to see the full glory of Khazad-dûm, of which we saw in the Fellowship of the Ring. If you guys remember, that's where Gandalf fought the Balrog of Morgoth, and also kind of fell himself, but you know how it is. But really, I'm really looking forward to seeing that environment recreated in this show with this budget, looking completely badass and lively with, you know, just people there, because as we know in the films, the Fellowship is completely inhabited by orcs and cave trolls. Up next, we get a little quick shot of a younger Elrond in the trailer, but we also, speaking of the Vanity Fair exclusive images, seems that they got quite a few, get to see a much younger half-elf Elrond, played by Robert Aramayo, described as a politically ambitious young leader. We also get to see him with a younger Galadriel as well, reuniting in the Kingdom of Lindon. Now, we can't forget that Elrond's wife is Galadriel's daughter. And then, as many of you know, they went on to have, I believe, 3 children. They had 2 twin sons, and also, of course, Arwen. Now, the thing is, and I think this is where some people are getting rubbed the wrong way, like really heavily so, and there's a lot of comments out there on the internet about this already. Canon and continuity, should I say, in The Lord of the Rings when adapting it is very, very, very important to fans. But I'm not going to pretend at the same time that Peter Jackson didn't change some things up when creating that incredible trilogy. And it seems that this show could be as well. And what I'm mainly on about here specifically is that we're getting some characters that are going to be introduced into the show, such as Elendil or Isildur. As it's described, one of the storylines will follow a sailor named Isildur, played by Maxim Baldry, years before he becomes a warrior and, you know, kind of chops up Sauron's little finger, and you know how the rest goes. He kind of gets corrupt and says the ring is mine and kind of screws it all up for everyone. Well done, Isildur. But the thing is, these characters are from quite a bit later in the Second Age, but yet they're going to be, you know, kind of condensed down in the timeline to be included in this show. I suppose to just prevent massive, massive time jumps between episodes or seasons. Again, we do get some more images of a younger Galadriel meeting the character known as Halbrand in a situation that's described as survival at sea. This is apparently where the series actually starts. Halbrand is described to be running from the past, but Galadriel is described as fighting for the future. Now, with one of the final shots of the trailer, I have a little bit of a theory, because we could be getting some kind of flashbacks to some earlier times, even before the Second Age and where the show picks up, because in some of the other footage we've seen, even before this teaser trailer came out, we have this shot in which many believe in the background are the two trees of Valinor, both being Telperion and Lorelin. Now, if you didn't know already, these trees, a long time ago in Middle-earth, far away, provided the source of light to Valinor. However, after shining for almost around 1500 years, that's where we had frickin' Melkor frickin' destroy them due to his hatred of the Valar. But the confusing thing I found about this theory, and I'm guessing many other Lord of the Rings fans out there, is that the show is set during the Second Age of Middle-earth, and the two trees are also in Valinor. So, like, what I'm trying to say here is that if they are indeed the two trees in the background, well, this isn't Middle-earth, it is most likely Valinor. Now, this links into this teaser trailer itself, because I do believe that we could be getting a flashback sequence, because I think with the destruction of the two trees by Melkor and Ungoliant, I can't frickin' pronounce the names, like, that happened all the way back then, so why would we be seeing this footage on screen with potentially the trees still in action, not having been destroyed, unless in a similar way to the Fellowship, they want to kick off this series with a little bit of an understanding of the evil that once was and how the trees were destroyed, somewhat leading into a bit of the Second Age, how Sauron, you know, kind of disappeared for a bit, but now he's coming back under a different alias. You see what I'm getting at here. And that last shot where we see elves facing a bunch of orcs, which I'm not gonna lie, I cannot wait for the potential action sequences we have. It could be going back all the way to those times. Again, just somewhat setting up the show with a little bit of an understanding of what even came before the Second Age, with the evil of Melkor, how Sauron served him, how that means Sauron's either going to enter this show, obviously the Rings of Power, which heavily pertains to Sauron. You get what I'm trying to say. I can't be sure on that. I'm just not really sure what else this last shot could be with regards to the orcs facing the elves. I do not believe it has anything to do, I mean, I could be wrong, but Sauron, you know, and his orcs facing the elves as seen in the first shot in the Fellowship, because I doubt that this show or first season will end with the battle against Sauron. Considering the show is called The Rings of Power, you would have thought that maybe the series would end around that point, considering we could have Sauron, the Deceiver, quite literally deceiving for multiple seasons. I doubt we're going to get that part here. So overall, guys, my takeaway is that I haven't seen the show. For all intents and purposes, I can't fully judge it, but from what I can gather with vibes from the trailer, it does kind of tick my box of fantasy. The essence of Lord of the Rings was a little bit underwhelming to me. It's got some trickled bits in there, and there's quite a bit of it where it makes me feel good. It does feel like, hey, that's Lord of the Rings, but it feels a little bit more too modern fantasy in the way that I'm not saying Lord of the Rings fans don't enjoy The Hobbit, but the way that Peter Jackson filmed the original trilogy, I just wish there was a bit more of a raw, kind of rusticy kind of vibe to it, if that makes sense, like the original trilogy films, because when they got around to The Hobbit, it just had a bit too much of a modernized glow on it, and I'm not saying that this needs to look like an early 2000s shot movie, but do you see what I'm trying to get at there? I might not be articulating it well. The Hobbit movies, as much as I do enjoy them still, despite the issues they have, the one thing that I think disturbs me the most, all while capturing Middle-earth, is that it felt a bit too glowy. I can't really... To me, it felt like there's this hue there that just isn't really present in the original trilogy, and I feel like you can translate that onto screen still in modern day, but they kind of just choose not to, and this show, just like the Hobbit movies, feel just kind of very reliant on that same essence as well. But at the end of the day, that doesn't pull the whole rug out of the show for me. You know, just it still looks visually pleasing, but there's still something off-ish about it to me, and that's me being really candid there. I can't really massively critique it. It looks like, okay, this fabled Lord of the Rings Rings of Power show is finally getting unveiled for the first time in years and years of what we've heard about it. And it's like, we kind of see it and it's like, okay, this looks kind of cool, Galadriel looks awesome, oh, this is happening, that's happening, but I just hope it delivers. I really hope it delivers. But, you know, it feels like the Lord of the Rings fandom, or at least the most vocal part, is quite rejecting it. So we're gonna have to wait and see what we make of this show when it comes out, when we get some more promo. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below. Are you excited for the possibilities of just, you know, exploring the story of the Second Age of Middle-earth? Obviously, Sauron the Deceiver kind of low-key doing his thing, following a younger Galadriel. How do you feel about lots of original characters being introduced? Do you not mind that? Again, for me, I can't judge it until I see it. I don't mind adaptations having a bit of innovation, but there's a slight point of where innovation becomes deviation. So maybe it's just the fact that Isildur's being included this much earlier on is too much of a stretch away from canon that you don't agree with. There's lots of discourse to be had, so I'll be reading all of the comments. But I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this video. Just, it would really help support the, you know, further coverage of other content on this channel. But other than that, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of Middle-earth in the next video. Goodbye.